My name is Ethan Petrick, and this is...
Whoa, he has trouble with the snap, and the ball is free. It's picked up by Michigan State's Jalen Watts Jackson, and he scores on the last play of the game. Kellogg's throw. It's going to be tipped and caught. It's caught. It's caught. It's a touchdown, Western Carolina. You can't believe what just happened. What a time to be alive. Diving touchdown, Nebraska. Davison on the deflection. Nebraska's a point away. Rosen fakes the spike. And the end zone touchdown. Whoa.
Oh, they don't have him yet. Look at Tommy Frazier. How many tackles can one man break?
35-30. It'll be Galloway down the sideline. He's going to score. He's going to score. He's going to score. It's a touchdown. How much?
That's right, this is Save Saturdays. You back with episode number 2. Starting off the show, just a quick congratulations to Coastal Carolina taking down number 20 UL Lafayette in a little bit of Wednesday night action this week. So congratulations to the Chanticleers taking down the Ragin' Cajun, two excellent all nation names, mascots there. So congratulations to the Chanticleers. Starting off the show, winners, losers, every week. Looking back at last week, we got a couple winners. We had so many winners, in fact, that I had to add a new category. Normally only doing 3 winners and losers. Now we're doing 3.5, maybe, possibly. But my number 1 winner is the Big Ten Conference. So the reason why the Big Ten is a winner is you look at possibly they could have been left out of the playoff this year. They're going to be playing less teams than the Big 12, ACC, and SEC. So there's potential for those conferences to have an undefeated team and a team with more wins and only 1 loss. And so the margin for error in the Big Ten was slim. If your top dog, Ohio State, loses 1 game, goes 7-1, that's certainly not as good looking as a 11-1 Texas that only lost to Oklahoma, or a 1-loss Bama that only loses to Georgia, something like that. So there was potential, especially how the season was starting out. Texas looked good in week 1. Oklahoma looked good in week 1. Georgia looks good. Bama looks good. Clemson, great as always. Florida had looked good. Miami looked like they were back. And Notre Dame, as always, is doing their thing. But after this last week, you have to expect that the Big Ten is almost a clear shot, even with a 1-loss champion, if it's Ohio State. Texas has lost 2 games now. Oklahoma's lost 2 games now. The big threat out of the ACC was that they could potentially put 2 teams in. Well, now Miami's lost, and you have to anticipate that Clemson or Notre Dame is going to get a loss. And then also, it's going to take perfection from the SEC now to get 2 teams in. Georgia and Alabama play this week. They're both, one of them's going to have a loss. Florida takes a loss. They don't have any other undefeated teams. They have not looked like the most powerful conference through these last couple of weeks. Proven so with a huge loss by Florida. So, because of that, I anticipate that the Big Ten probably doesn't need to have an exceptional season out of Ohio State as long as they can win 7 games. I think they're in. My other big winner is Trevor Lawrence. You've heard a lot of people shouting Justin Fields and Trey Lance's name. I'm one of those guys. I think Trey Lance is an exceptional quarterback, but Trevor Lawrence went out against a top 5 opponent in Miami, and he put together a 29-41, 292 and 3 touchdown with no interception performance against those Hurricanes. He really solidified his stock in this game, I think, as the top quarterback, barring a meltdown in the last bit of the season here. I think Trevor Lawrence has locked himself up as being the first quarterback off the board, barring anything insane from Justin Fields, a Joe Burrow-esque season. But Trevor Lawrence, he looked sharp all game. The game was never in doubt, and he was sitting on the bench by the end, just watching his team run it out against a top 5 opponent. So for Trevor Lawrence, that win was very big for his draft stock. And if you're if you're Trevor Lawrence today, you have to be feeling pretty good about your chances to go number 1 for quarterbacks in the draft. My third big winner from this last week was Jimbo Fisher. Texas A&M took down number 4 Florida in a big win, an upset at Kyle Field. And it was a response by Jimbo Fisher's squad to a lot of national criticism. Jimbo Fisher was the focal point of said criticism. A lot of people saying, hey, this isn't a normal Jimbo squad. They're vulnerable. They're not very good. Well, you want to know what Jimbo did? He went out and he beat a powerful offense, outscored a powerful offense. Neither team played solid defense, but he went out there with his arguably worst skill players, and he beat the Gators. And he proved, hey, I'm still here. I'm still a good coach. I'm going to beat anybody any weekend. Certainly won him back a lot of fans down at Texas A&M. So Jimbo Fisher, definitely a big winner from this last week. And then going off the same token, a small winner, a micro winner as I call it, Isaiah Spiller, the running back for the Aggies. He had 27 carries, 174 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's coming after a game in which he only had 25 yards rushing and was held to 2.3 yards per carry. I was highly critical of him last week, and I'm not going to say he responded to me because he definitely didn't even hear my podcast, but he responded after that poor game, and he put together an exceptional performance. If he did that every week, he'd win the Heisman, no doubt. So, Isaiah Spiller, congratulations. You're a big winner from last weekend. Great game, young man. Losers, SEC defenses, it's been awful. They're my biggest loser. All the games have been high scoring. Looking at last week, only 2 games had neither team go over 40 points. And in one of those games, Auburn, Arkansas, they combined for 58 points. So even when the defenses are playing well, they're still shootouts. It was 28-30. So looking at that, this is very uncharacteristic of the SEC. Normally, you're seeing, 17 to 31 maybe. Usually the games aren't going over 50 points. But pandemic year, COVID, whatever you want to say it is, no crowds, whatever explanation you have, the defense has just been uncharacteristically bad in the SEC. You watch the LSU-Mizzou game. Mizzou's got their top 3 receivers down. Mizzou's just working up and down the field. LSU working up and down the field. Where is the defense in the SEC? This is your calling card. Maybe next to the Big Ten, SEC is the top defensive conference in all of college football, and it doesn't seem like their defenses could stop a wet paper bag blowing in the breeze at this point. Also, on the same note, I'm going to have to say kind of a loser within a loser is Bo Pelini, the defensive coordinator for LSU, former head coach of the Nebraska Cornhuskers and Youngstown State Penguins. He comes back to the FBS and has not had a very good start. Through the first 3 games, Bo Pelini's defense has given up 623 yards, 266 yards, 586 yards for a total of 1,475 yards or 491 yards per game. That's pretty terrible. Before the season, head coach Ed Orgeron of the Tigers was talking Pelini up, saying he thinks that the defense will be much improved. Bo Pelini runs a 4-3 defense. Previous defensive coordinator Dave Aranda ran a 3-4. So maybe the shift to that can be the explanation for Bo Pelini's struggles. He's also coming back from the FCS to the FBS. It's a much different game, especially going from the FCS to the SEC. But it's been rough. It has been rough for Pelini, but it kind of is it's the trend in the SEC right now. So I'm not going to be too hard on Bo Pelini. It's just he's got to be a loser because it's been historically bad. My next loser is going to be Sam Ehlinger. Not because he's played poorly, but because his entire career at Texas has been wasted. This is a 4-star kid, 119th ranked player in the country per 24/7. He had interest from top-tier programs around the country. He didn't really get a lot of offers because Texas came in early, and he was a Texas fan. He's from Austin, and I think a lot of people knew it would be a waste of an offer. So, he was a good player. Defenses routinely have to plan to stop this kid. He can run the ball. He can throw the ball really well. He's a good leader. And Texas has wasted his entire career there. They lose the Red River rivalry this weekend, in which he had to lead the team in not only rushing yards, but carries. He had 4 times as many carries as the rest of his teammates. And the defense for Texas routinely puts him in terrible positions. He has to come from behind. He has to throw the ball 50 times to come back. You're going to get interceptions. He threw 2 interceptions this weekend. You don't want to see it, but you're going to get interceptions when you're putting that much pressure on your quarterback. You're asking him to come from behind against another high-powered offense. You're going to get those mistakes. You can't put your quarterback in that situation and expect him to be perfect. And Sam Ehlinger has done the best he can, and he gets criticism for his interceptions. Maybe a bad throw here or there, missing an open receiver, but maybe don't put your quarterback in a position where he needs to come from behind and win every game. Maybe put a little bit more pressure on your head coach, who I'm not a fan of, admittedly. I'm not a Tom Herman fan, but the defense in Austin has been awful, and Sam Ehlinger, he had a chance. If they'd beaten Oklahoma this weekend and they'd run the table, they had a shot at the college football playoff. He played great this weekend. You heard it. Big Sam. Big Sam. Big Sam. Makes some big runs. Scored a lot of clutch touchdowns. But he can't carry him on his back, and he couldn't. I think this is a kid who's going to have a great pro career. I would really like to see him go to the New England Patriots because I feel like that would be a match made in heaven. Sam Ehlinger is a big football guy, lives and breathes football, perfect Belichick quarterback. If it works out that way, I will be closetedly excited. I hate the Patriots, but that would be awesome to see. I think Sam Ehlinger is going to be a great pro quarterback, but unfortunately his college career has been wasted at Texas. So he is a loser because I know just from what I've read about the kid, he would have loved to have brought Texas back. He just couldn't do it. He's going to be my second biggest loser of the week. Third loser, me. There's no denying him. It's a lot of big claims last weekend. I whiffed pretty hard on a lot of them. I said Miles Brennan was a good quarterback. He wasn't bad, and that LSU was going to be just fine. And I was wrong. They went out and lost to Mizzou in pretty anemic fashion, I would say. Their offense didn't look horrible, but there's no reason they should have lost that game. I said Texas A&M was a bad team. That was wrong. I said Florida was a good team. Clearly that was wrong because they lost to Texas A&M. I wasn't wrong on Texas though. I said Tom Herman sucked. I was right. That was right. Dude melts down in big games. A good coach would have won that game. Texas was in position to win that game. And it got to the point where I started thinking that both teams were trying to lose because it just seemed like they couldn't hand it to each other enough. So I'm going to have to say that Tom Herman, I was right on Tom Herman. I don't think he's going to be the Texas head coach next season. I'm going to keep my eyes on that for sure, but whoa, was I wrong on a lot of other things this last weekend, especially Isaiah Spiller. He proved me wrong big time. So kudos to him, and I clearly need to reevaluate my running back analysis because he looked exceptional this weekend. And then my micro loser is going to be Dan Mullen after the game. Big quote, hot take, says he wants to pack the swamp. And now Florida's game got postponed because they have a lot of positive COVID tests. You hate to see it. Once again, not a Corona bro. I just think it's a little, it's an L. It's an L. You call for your fans to pack the swamp when everyone else is telling you to avoid crowds, and then because of coronavirus, and then your team goes out and gets coronavirus, and you have to postpone your game. That's a fat L. He's walked back his statement now, but that's my last loser for the week. Make sure to stick around for the next segment. We'll be talking to Skylar Petrick. He's my brother, big Cornhusker fan. We're talking all things Nebraska, Big Ten. We're also going to look into our game predictions. It's a bit of a bad week in college football, admittedly, but Georgia-Alabama is a big game, and there are some interesting ACC games to watch this weekend, so be sure to stick around for that, and we'll catch you guys in about a minute. Welcome back to the second segment of Save Saturdays U with Ethan Petrick. Joining me today is my brother, Skylar Petrick. Skylar, how you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Got up early today. Worked on early break with Sip and Jake. Jake's out though, so it was an interesting show. They talked about some good stuff.
Yeah, I listened this morning. Good stuff. Good conversation. But thanks for having me on this morning.
Yeah, and so I'm glad that you're nice and well prepared. We've both heard the same Nebraska people talking. So we're gonna be talking about a lot of Nebraska during your segment. But for starters, I make some bold claims every week with my winners and losers. Any big ones that you disagreed with or thought were rather sharp?
I don't know. I think playoff-wise, the Big Ten's a winner, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't know if I'd really call the Big Ten a winner today with all the COVID stuff. I don't know. They gave themselves so little wiggle room and such a small margin of error. I just have no idea how they're going to play out their entire season as scheduled. So I don't know. Playoff-wise, sure, the Big Ten's a winner, but kind of bigger picture, I don't know if the Big Ten's winning today. And then I think we need to settle down on the Bo Pelini hate through the first 3 weeks of the season. Defenses across the country have just been getting torched. So Bo Pelini's a good coach. I think he came in, started a new job in the middle of the pandemic, and I think he'll figure it out. I think LSU will figure it out, but I think we need to settle down with the Bo Pelini hate just a little bit.
Now, I'm not calling for his job. I contextualized it. I put him in the broader scope of the all SEC defenses are struggling. I just thought that it was of note that he is particularly struggling given Ed Orgeron's comments before the season in which he felt that they had a vastly improved defense. So, yeah, I don't think that Bo Pelini deserves to be fired or his job called for, but he definitely was a loser last week.
Yeah, I think context is important with Bo Pelini too. So I can't remember exactly, but I believe he was at Youngstown State still yet last season, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, so he's been in the FCS ever since he got fired out of the Nebraska job. So that's a big step, going from FCS Youngstown State to the defending national champion in LSU. So it's kind of jumping in with both feet here, and like I said, he'll figure it out. But I think time is important here. I think he has to get back into that SEC rhythm. So I'll be curious to see how things play out throughout the season. I don't think it'll be this bad all throughout the year.
They definitely did not start out on the right foot against Mississippi State, and their season does get more difficult. They're going to face more top teams starting with Florida this week, and given what you've seen from Florida's offense, if you're an LSU fan, you have to be concerned.
Yeah, I think they have issues on both sides of the ball. I say that Bo Pelini's going to figure it out. I think he will, but even with that being said, I don't think LSU is a serious competitor at the top of the SEC. I think they lost way too much. I think Ed Orgeron's stock is maybe a little overvalued. I think LSU is probably going to get torched this season, and they're looking at maybe a 500, 7-win season. I can't see them making a big push for an SEC championship bid. They lost too much. I don't think it's that good of a football team.
I agree. I felt that last season was an anomaly more than like a new rule for them. They were going to fall back to the pack, kind of like anyone who has a one-hit wonder, basically. That's what I always saw out of LSU, and that's certainly proven to be the case so far through this season.
Yeah, I'm kind of chuckling here actually a little bit because my expectation is that LSU is going to revert back to what LSU has been ever since kind of the Les Miles craze back in, I think it was, 2009 or something like that. 8-9 win team year in and year out. Ed Orgeron is not a top tier coach in college football. I hate to hear that from the national media. I don't think he's a big time coach. I think he's a good coach, but I don't think he's a Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney. I don't think he's going to coach a 10, 11 win team year in and year out. I don't think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are a lot of similarities between Orgeron's squad and Les Miles' early tenure at LSU. Both coaches saw early success. If we can take anything from Les Miles' early success, it's that it's really hard to maintain, especially in the SEC.
Yeah, I never really thought about the comparison between Les Miles and Ed Orgeron. I largely agree, even down to their personalities. I think they're both kind of goofy guys. I think they are they do things their way a little bit differently, and I think they're good coaches, not great coaches. So.
Shifting over to a program and a coach that are trying to prove themselves, maybe show that they can be a competitive team. We're both big Nebraska fans. They have struggled mightily in recent history. And now it appears that there is a quarterback competition in Lincoln. Coach Frost came out and said that the offense looks very good when Luke McCaffrey is under center. What do you make of that? What do you think that the QB competition is good for Nebraska? Do you think it's bad? What are your thoughts?
Well, when I first heard the quote, I texted you about it. I thought it was a big deal, and when I was looking at stories that ran the next day, when I listened to some of the talking heads and Nebraska radio, it was a big time quote, and people did make something of it. And now that we're a couple days removed, I'm kind of taking a step back and asking myself, is it really that big of a deal? Did Scott Frost kind of strategically make that comment to indicate that there was more to the quarterback competition than people thought? And I don't know. And ultimately, none of us really know what the quarterback competition looks like, because none of us have seen any, tape from practice, and we've only heard from Adrian and Luke, once over, past several weeks. So it's hard to gauge this, but where I fall in the quarterback competition is I'm leaning towards playing Adrian Martinez. If it's neck and neck between those two, I think it's almost irresponsible to start a freshman with no start against Ohio State. I just strategically, I'm not sure that makes a whole lot of sense. And Adrian Martinez has proven that he can weather the storm and he can kind of trudge through the crap. And I just think it's going to be a tall task for Luke McCaffrey to step in against Ohio State and stay competitive. I'm just not sure that's realistic.
Well, I believe that this will certainly be telling. Whoever they choose to start, it will be telling on how much this staff values experience.
Another thing I'd say, too, is that Adrian Martinez, he got ripped last season. And I was on that bandwagon, too, where I ripped on Adrian Martinez. I was calling for a change at quarterback. And looking back, I don't think the criticism was necessarily fair. Their offensive line play was terrible. They didn't figure out running back until late in the season. Their wide receiver play was atrocious outside of J.D. Skillman. Tight ends were largely non-existent. And Adrian Martinez was asked to drag that offense through the season. And because their offensive line play was so bad, I think Scott Frost had to had to play call differently than he would like to, and I don't think it lended itself to that roster strength. The ball was going to the outside all the time. The screen plays, bubble plays, stretch plays. That just didn't work for the offense. And so we heaped a lot of criticism on Adrian Martinez. I don't think it was necessarily fair. I think the competition is pushing him. I think the roster, especially the offensive line, is significantly better. And I think we're going to see a much improved Adrian Martinez. I think it'll be similar to, if not better than his freshman year.
I think without a doubt that Adrian Martinez definitely regressed from his freshman year to his sophomore year. But I think a lot of the criticism has to do with preseason expectations, which Nebraska fans are notable for heaping on players without maybe them having proved it or earned it. And so I think in Adrian's case, he didn't necessarily have an awful statistic year. He was still in the top 3 in the Big Ten in all-purpose yards, total yards of offense. And he's, by all accounts, if you just look at it on paper, a good quarterback. On the field, it tells a different story, but I was never really on the put in Luke because he's going to be so much better. My kind of thoughts are the coaches are seeing in practice who is better, and they haven't made the switch yet, so clearly Luke isn't. If he is better, he's not that much better.
Yeah, I think is there a legit quarterback competition this year? Yeah, I think there is. And I think ultimately Adrian's going to win that job. I actually think the more interesting discussion is going to be next offseason and moving forward. I think this basically a free year of eligibility is going to make the quarterback conversation very interesting and, quite frankly, uncomfortable in the next couple of years. I would love to see both guys finish their careers at Nebraska, obviously, but I don't know if that's realistic given this free year. I think Adrian's the guy right now, but they're pretty even right now. Man, who knows how much Luke is going to progress over the next year or two here.
Right. And I also, going into next offseason, you have to consider current freshman Logan Smothers as well in that quarterback competition, another 4-star quarterback who was highly touted by a lot of recruiting services late. He led his team to a state championship in Alabama. He's a guy that I really like, and he's just going to throw a whole nother wrench into the mix there and could really complicate the whole situation.
Yeah, if I'm peering into my crystal ball, I think Adrian starts this year, like I've said, but I don't think he finishes his college football career at Nebraska. I'm not sure it's realistic. I think it's funny that people talk about Adrian being Purdue's co and Frost's guy. He's their guy. I don't know how you fall on this, but I feel like Luke McCaffrey is more their guy than Adrian Martinez is. So I don't know. I don't see a path for Adrian Martinez to finish his career at Nebraska. I hope he does. I think he's a high character guy, and I think he's a really good football player. But I don't know if I see it.
Well, I would agree with you that Luke McCaffrey has always seemed more like the quarterback on the roster that the staff would prefer. If the years were reversed and McCaffrey had shown up first, I don't think that there would even be a conversation right now. But given the fact that Adrian was part of that shortened 2018 class that the staff only had a couple weeks to put together, he might have been their pick of what was left at the time, whereas McCaffrey was hand-chosen, was selected to be the quarterback. So I definitely agree with you that I have always gotten the impression that McCaffrey is more their guy. Then when he shows up early last offseason, Coach Frost immediately starts talking about his leadership. It's always appeared to me that the coaches have had a preference or a bias towards McCaffrey.
Yeah, I hear from fans all the time that Adrian's the guy. They're not going to move off their guy. I think fans are totally wrong on that. I think Luke McCaffrey, and I don't want to talk about Logan Smothers too much because he is, he's brand new. We don't know what Logan Smothers is going to turn out to be. But I feel like those are more their guys than Adrian Martinez. But regardless, 21 career starts, that's pretty valuable when you're playing the second-ranked team in the nation opening weekend. So,
do you feel we will see Luke McCaffrey start a game this season if he does not win the job?
Man, that's a tough call. It's hard for me to believe with the way Scott Frost uses the quarterback in the run game and Adrian Martinez's injury history over the last 2 years. It's hard for me to believe he's going to stay healthy for 8 games. So that lends itself to me saying, yeah, we'll probably see Luke McCaffrey start a game. I'm hoping this doesn't happen, but I'm afraid it will. I think Nebraska faithful is going to get pretty restless if Adrian Martinez is in fact the starter and is struggling. If he starts throwing picks, he can't complete passes, taking some bad sacks, I think you're gonna hear the Luke, chant from the stand, and I hope that doesn't put kind of undue pressure on Scott Frost to make a change. But, fan opinion does pull some weight in Nebraska. It really does. So I hope we don't see Luke start for that reason, but I'm not going to discount that as a possibility.
It's interesting that you bring up Adrian's injury history because, in fact, he has not completed a full season. He has not played every game in a season since his sophomore year of high school at Clovis West. So there are definitely some injury concerns there, but I also have injury concerns about Luke McCaffrey. He's a smaller kid. I'm afraid that some of the bigger bodies in the Big Ten could rough him up a little bit, and there's not much depth beyond McCaffrey and Adrian. It's hard to have more than 2 serviceable quarterbacks on your roster, and especially with the offense set up the way it is in Nebraska, it opens the quarterbacks up to taking some shots. So I'll be interested to see if we see McCaffrey at all. But moving on to a more team-focused discussion, what, as a fan, do you expect out of the Nebraska Cornhuskers this coming season?
So I'm not going to hop on the hype train here, but I expect to see a much improved football team. Offensively, I think that offensive line is going to be a lot better. I think it's good to come into the season with the running back position solidified. We haven't had that the last 2 seasons. Having Dedrick Mills there is huge. And I think despite the quarterback questions, I think there's this feeling that whether it's McCaffrey or Martinez, we're going to be fine at the quarterback position. So I think offensively, Scott Frost is going to be able to do some of the things that he wants to do on that side of the ball, namely running the ball downfield. Defensively, a lot of question marks, but I think we saw that unit emerge significantly in the Iowa game. I remember watching it going, man, the defense is playing really well. They're totally bailing out the offense. I just think we saw some grit. I think we saw execution. I think they were opportunistic, and I can't imagine that they're not going to build off of that this year. I think that unit's more locked in, and I expect to see some real progress there. And I'm not going to discount a potential competitive game week 1 against Ohio State. I think this pandemic lends itself to helping the underdog, and I think Nebraska has some dudes. I think they can at least compete with Ohio State. I'm not going to say they're going to pull off an upset, but I think they can compete, and I think they can compete in the Big Ten kind of overall this season, finally.
What do you have the win-loss record at? What kind of number are you bouncing around in your head?
So I think what was the original number from Vegas? I think it was 4 points. Is that what it was?
It was either 4 or 3.5.
Yeah, I think that's a good number. I think you see a lot of people very pessimistic. It's going to be 2-3 games maybe this season, and I just don't see that. I think it's totally reasonable to get to 4 or 5 games. I think it's totally reasonable to expect to win against kind of one of those big 4 opponents, Penn State, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Iowa. I think they can peel off at least one win against those 4. I think 4 or 5 is probably fair, and I'd be okay with that if they, in the games they lose, if they can keep it close and stay competitive and show some fight finally, I think that's a win for Nebraska.
Speaking frankly, I think a 3-5 record with close losses to those 4 teams, competitive losses to those 4 teams would be totally fine with me. Over these last couple of years, we've seen Nebraska go in to some of these bigger games and just get absolutely shellacked, and it certainly doesn't build confidence or build any hype around your program. But when you go in as an underdog to the Shoe in 2018 and play that Ohio State team to a 1-score game and lose a game you probably should have won, that builds a lot of excitement around the program. So I certainly agree that you don't have to be winning games to build excitement.
They need to beat Iowa. I think that is the one game they need to win. They need to beat Iowa.
Iowa is vulnerable this year, starting a new quarterback. They have some scandals and some issues this offseason with their coaching staff. So it'll be interesting to watch them through the first couple of games, and we'll probably get a better idea about where Iowa's standing going into that Black Friday game. So I agree with you that I would say Iowa or Wisconsin, beating either of those 2 teams would have probably the same net effect on the program.
Here's one thing I will say too, and I'd be curious to ask you what you think. Are we positive that Ohio State is the world beater that the national press is making them out to be? I'm not so convinced on Ohio State. They lost some really good players, and I know what Justin Fields did last season, but they're talking about him being the second best quarterback in this year's class, and it wasn't that long ago that he got beat out by Jake Fromm for the Georgia job. People seem to forget about that. So I'm not totally convinced on Ohio State. It was just 2 years ago that Nebraska played them 38-36. I believe that was in Columbus. So I'm not buying into the Ohio State hype. I think it's going to be a good football team, but I'm not going to automatically put them in the playoffs.
Well, there's something to be said about the sheer talent that they lost on the defensive side of the ball, losing Jeffrey Okudah and Chase Young among the bigger names on that defense. I expect not the greatest Ohio State defense, and I think that's where the national press is getting tripped up, is they see this exciting offense with Chris Olave, Trey Sermon, and Justin Fields coming up for Ohio State, and they see them as a potentially all-time great offense and just assume that Ohio State's going to be running it back with another exceptional defense. I definitely think they're going to be above average, but it's an unproven defense and it's a mystery at this point. It's a question mark, and a lot of those guys will be seeing their first significant action against Nebraska week 1. So I definitely don't think an upset is out of the question, but given the recent history of Nebraska versus Ohio State, I would never confidently bet my own money on that game on an upset.
If I was a betting man, I'd be betting Nebraska. I bet that line will be something insane, like 21 and a half points or something. If that's the line on that game, I'm taking Nebraska all day.
Currently, Ohio State is favored by 21 and a half points.
Yeah, there you go. I think that's an absurd line for that game. I think that shows the media bias towards Ohio State. I think it's a good football team, but we haven't seen them play at all. And I don't know. 2 years ago, Nebraska played them 38-36. I think they're going to be competitive. I think 3 touchdowns is a little insane.
Well, we'll see. By a week from Saturday, we'll find out what the answer to all of our burning off-season questions are. Shifting over to a more future projection, Nebraska picked up the commitment of 3-star tight end James Carney out of Norris High School. He is a blazing fast tight end at 4'6", big kid, plays on both sides of the ball for Norris. What do you see the impact of James Carney and his future at Nebraska in a class in which we took 3 tight ends?
Yeah, I think this illustrates that Nebraska is doing the right thing on the offensive side of the ball when it comes to building a roster. They started at quarterback. I think everybody would agree that they're in a very good position at the quarterback spot. It all starts there. But then they really focus their attention on the offensive line. And we're hearing that the offensive line should be a force to be reckoned with this season. So they're building the roster inside out, and now they're kind of shoring up the tight end spot. I think that's going to be huge for the offense. If Nebraska can build an offense that's kind of premised on their quarterback, offensive line, running back, and then involve their tight ends and really focus on the middle of the field, I think that's great. And I think that's what this big tight end class kind of illustrates, what they want to do in the middle of the field. The other thing I'll say, too, is that for Scott Frost, it's all about building culture, right? And James Carney, he's a Nebraska guy. He's made it very clear he wants to play for Nebraska, lifelong dream. And so it's easy to instill a winning culture and Nebraska's culture with a Nebraska guy, somebody who already buys into, Big Red, right? So I think it was smart for Nebraska to offer him. I'm glad to see James Carney commit to Nebraska, and I think it'll pay dividends on the field and in the locker room. I think it's great for culture.
I definitely agree with you. The roster building, just the way they've shaped it and attacked that in recruiting the last 3 years is certainly encouraging. We saw a lot of struggles with special teams the last offseason. They've responded by going out and making special teams a focus this year with a lot of walk-on offers and scholarship offers. Again, all 3 tight ends that we mentioned, Thomas Fedoni, A.J. Rollins, and James Carney, they're all coming from within probably 100 miles of Lincoln and Omaha. All grew up Cornhusker fans, so certainly want to get those guys. Nebraska's made 7 in-state offers this year, getting 5 of those guys, losing Keegan Johnson and Avante Dickerson to Minnesota and Iowa. Certainly hurts to lose those players to division rivals, but getting those 5 in-state players are definitely going to help with the culture, you have to imagine. Yep, go ahead. I was going to say, looking broadly at the Big Ten, do you see any surprises a la Minnesota this season? Could Nebraska be a potential surprise underdog that ends up going, 10-2 equivalency this year in our shortened 8 games season?
So I said earlier, I'm not going to buy into the Ohio State hype. I can say that while simultaneously thinking that they're probably going to win the Big Ten. I think that Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten. That's just kind of been the track record the last couple of years. I think it's going to be a lot of the same. I think Wisconsin is going to be a solid football team. I think they'll probably have a really good defense. I'll be interested to see how the offense operates with Graham Mertz, but I think they'll probably lose a game or two to a team they shouldn't lose to. I think Iowa will probably be in a similar position to Wisconsin. Michigan will probably get beat by a team they shouldn't lose to. I think Nebraska has the potential to maybe make some noise in the West. I don't I don't see that division as particularly strong this year. I don't know how you. I think Jonathan Taylor graduating from. I think that's a division-changing loss. To be honest with you, that guy was a world beater. So I think Nebraska could make some noise in the division. I wouldn't go as far to pick them. I think that's maybe a little optimistic, but I think they'll make some noise. But I think the safe bet is probably Wisconsin.
I agree with you. Looking at all of the top teams in the West, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota from last season, they all lost significant contributors to those teams. And so I feel like the Big Ten West is as big a question mark, as much up for grabs as it's possibly been in recent history. And you'd certainly love Nebraska to stay.
I don't buy into the Minnesota hype either. That feels like a team poised to drop off from, I think, 11 games they won last season. I feel like that's going to be a 500 football team, if I'm being honest. I don't buy into the Minnesota hype train at all. I do think PJ Fleck's a really good football coach, but I would expect a significant drop-off from Minnesota.
Well, losing Antoine Woodfield Jr. and Kamal Martin in the draft, and Tyler Johnson as well on the offense, all three of those players were very big contributors to that successful season last year, and you have to wonder how big of an impact were those guys in the locker room in addition to being on the field. I think most people had them pegged as the leaders of that team. So I'll be interested to watch the first couple of games for the Gophers. If they get wins but they struggle, it could be signs of a less successful season, but we'll see. Shifting over to this next week in college football immediately, we got some. It's not a great week for college football, but we do have one
It's a dog. It's a dog of a week.
It is. I was looking at my games coming up that I wanted to predict, and it was a struggle to find three. We did find three, but I do think that the Georgia-Alabama game is going to be exciting. That might be the only game I watch this week, but it'll be a good game. Both teams are undefeated coming into this game. Alabama's favored by 4 points, but Georgia's taking care of things this year. What are you seeing in that matchup from just the games you've watched and what you've heard?
I'm picking Georgia to win that football game. I think they're solid on both sides of the ball. I think Alabama exhibited some chinks in the armor potentially last week against Ole Miss. They got exposed on the defensive side of the ball. Georgia's a good football team. I think they will be the team to represent the SEC in the college football playoff this year. I also think not having Nick Saban on the sideline for that game, I think that's a big deal.
That will certainly be a big impact. I believe Steve Sarkisian will be the kind of go between for Saban in the box and the team on the field, and we saw how his tenure went in USC. So we'll see what the team looks like. I'm anticipating a lot of penalties from Alabama this weekend, some uncharacteristic mistakes, a lack of discipline. I also have Georgia winning 38-34. So I'm glad we're on the same page there, because when I went and looked at the teams, I usually like to look to see if one team maybe has one person that's just been having an uncharacteristically big year. And when I looked at Georgia, it looks like they're getting contributions all over the field. They've got a good defense, especially in the SEC this year. Their quarterback, he's not putting up gaudy numbers. Their running back not putting up gaudy numbers, but they're putting up solid numbers in passing and rushing. So I like Georgia in that game. Shifting over to Miami and Pittsburgh, both teams are coming off losses. Pitt's coming off 2 losses, but Miami looked like they were back. Took a huge loss to Clemson. How do you think they rebound?
I still think Miami's a good football team. Clemson's just unreal. Their personnel is just world class. So I don't fault Miami for getting their doors blown off against Clemson. I wouldn't be surprised if they rebound in a big way and blow out Pittsburgh. Derek King he's a freak at quarterback. So I think Miami will probably win that game big.
Are you thinking like 3 scores probably then?
Yeah, I would say 2 or 3 scores.
Well, I'm looking at a Pitt team that's come off 2 1-point losses. They lost 30-29 to NC State, followed that up with a 31-30 loss to BC. And so I think that it's a turning point game for that squad, Pat Narduzzi's squad up in Pittsburgh. And I think that they're going to play a solid game. You usually anticipate Pittsburgh is going to be a fundamentally sound team. And so I anticipate a closer game than you are. I have Miami winning 31-23. I just feel like Derek King will have a potentially, I'm not speaking for things to come here, but potential Heisman moment in that game. And I think Miami's going to be able to pull it out. But I do think it's going to be closer than most are anticipating. Moving on to Boston College versus Virginia Tech. These are both teams with 1 loss. But Virginia Tech is favored by 12. Interestingly, BC beat Pitt by 1 last weekend, but Virginia Tech lost to UNC by 11. What are you looking at for that game?
So, admittedly, I don't know much about Boston College or Virginia Tech, so it'd be hard for me to comment about what I'm expecting for that game. But man, Virginia Tech has not been relevant for 10 years now, probably. I remember when Virginia Tech, year in and year out, was a competitor in the ACC, and they've been terrible the last 10 years. So I don't know. I think that's been kind of an interesting observation. I'm not sure about what to expect in the BC Virginia Tech game, but I guess the line's 12 points. I'll take Virginia Tech.
Well, it certainly is nice to go from Michael Vick to Tyrod Taylor and only have 2 years in between those two, both exceptional college quarterbacks. I like Boston College in this game just because I don't feel Virginia Tech's proven much. I'm not sure what Vegas and the media is seeing. They only beat a winless Duke by 7 and lost to UNC by 11. That's a similar opponent between BC and Virginia Tech. Boston College only lost by 2. So I have Boston College winning that game 28-24, and I'm pretty confident in that pick. I watched the Boston College UNC game to completion. I think that Boston College has a couple of dudes in the backfield. They have a solid stable of tight ends. I really like the Eagles, but we'll see. That game's on ACC Network at 7 p.m. this Saturday. Other than that, Skylar, thank you for joining the show today. It was really nice to hear your takes on Nebraska, your perspective on the QB competition, and I also like that we agreed on the Alabama-Georgia game. So, thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you. Go Big Red.
Go Big Red. As Skylar leaves, we'll leave as well. Now you can catch me at Safe Saturdays on Saturday at 10 a.m., Offsides on Monday at 2, and Takeout Tuesday also at 2. So be sure to check those out. But as always, remember to save Saturdays, guys.